Ross Tucker, CBS Sports, Westwood One, and host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. He was on the call for the Texans and the Titans yesterday on CBS, and he'll be working Steelers-Ravens Saturday night. And then Sunday, he's got the Packers and the Eagles. The man is always working. Let me start with the Titans here. Is there any chance now with the number 1 overall pick that they won't go quarterback in the draft?
The only way I can see that, Dan, is if they really like one of the other options. Maybe that's Sam Darnold and they want to pay for them. I think that's tough, though. That would surprise me. You know,
does Will Levis get another year?
What's that, Levis?
Yeah, would they give him another year?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That was, I mean, they sat him down at 2 different times this year. He started the year. Then they sat him down. He had an injury, whatever, for a few weeks. Came back, had a couple pretty good games, but then reverted back with the turnovers. I don't think that they will do that. I mean, if they did that, if Levis came back, there would be a veteran of some significance, some consequence on the roster with him, like a Sam Darnold, like someone that you could sell to the fan base as a legitimate starter. I just think when you get that number 1 overall pick, like we showed it 5 times during the broadcast yesterday. You know how bad teams, the people put the bags on their head? Dan, one guy had a bag on his head, but on the front of the bag was a picture of Shedeur Sanders. That was what was on the front of the bag. So I think you get the number 1 pick. I think people want you to take a quarterback, whether that's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or whoever. That doesn't mean they're going to. I think it's really hard not to, because the fans get so excited about being able to have your pick number 1 guy, despite the fact that people are not in love with this quarterback class.
If you're Dion, will you let your son go to an organization like the Titans?
It's a really good question too. You know, they had a pretty good track record and history of winning for a long time. You know, when I was playing, they were always good. Even Vrabel had them going for a couple years. They've been down there, like, I think it's 3 straight years with at least 10 losses. I don't know. I guess the way I look at something like that is, what's his other alternatives that are so much better? The Raiders, the Giants. I mean, I guess the answer is yes. I don't, you know, maybe the Raiders and Giants have bigger fan bases or, you know, better tradition over a long stretch or whatever, branding, whatever you want to look at. But if you look at the way they've been run lately, I don't think they're any better than the Titans.
Well, I was wondering, Carolina or the Titans, better organization moving forward?
Well, I guess I would say Carolina right now because of the way Bryce Young played the second half of the year. I mean, it looks like they have their quarterback, which is just fascinating. I mean, he was bad as a rookie. He wasn't just bad. He was bad. And then even earlier this year, he was still not good. I mean, they went to Andy Dalton for a reason. There's a lesson there, I think, that maybe we need to have a little bit more patience with these guys. Maybe we need to give them more opportunities. I mean, just think about, Dan, Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. Both of those guys are on their 4th team, and they both are definitely top 15, arguably top 10 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. They both had tremendous years with their 4th NFL teams after being top 5 picks. So would that have happened if Baker stayed in Cleveland or Darnold stayed with the Jets? We don't think so. Probably not. But it still should tell us something, inform us something about maybe being more patient. Maybe you should give these guys a 3rd and 4th chance.
Fill in the blank. Next season, Aaron Rodgers will be?
Starting at quarterback for a disappointing team. I think that would be the way I would describe it. I don't think anybody wants him to be their quarterback. You know, you go down the list, I think they'd rather have Darnold in free agency. I think some of them would rather draft a young guy. I think Aaron Rodgers almost becomes like plan C at this point.
Mm.
And so a franchise that strikes out in free agency and or doesn't have a chance in the draft to get the kind of quarterback they really want, there will be a desperate times call for desperate measures franchise out there that will bring in Aaron Rodgers because they know they have to win this year. I mean, it's funny. I don't think they'll do this, but the first team that came to my mind, Dan, is the Giants, right? Like Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have to win this year. I'm a little surprised they're both coming back. I thought Daboll would. I didn't think Shane would, but they have to win this year. I don't think that the Mara family would want them to bring in Aaron Rodgers, but if you got to win, where else are they going to get a quarterback?
He can keep his house. Have to move. We're talking to Ross Tucker, CBS Sports Westwood 1. He'll be working the sidelines, Steelers, Ravens. That's Saturday night, and then in the booth for the Packers and the Eagles on Sunday. This game for the Steelers, how important is this? Now, I know Mike Tomlin, they never have whispers or rumors that he could be fired or they move on from him. But if they're one and done again in the postseason, and this is a Hall of Fame coach, but when's the last time they won a playoff game? 2017? And Russell Wilson's future. What hinges on this outcome this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's gigantic. I think it could impact both guys. Certainly Russell Wilson more than Mike Tomlin. And I'll say this too, if Zay Flowers can't play for the Ravens, that is significant. I think it sounds weird to say this, Dan. The Steelers at least need to make it competitive. I mean, they were non-competitive 3 games in a row there during that stretch where they had to play the Ravens, the Eagles, the Chiefs. It was clear that they were nowhere near that level of those teams. I don't think they need to necessarily beat the Ravens, but it's got to be a classic Steelers-Ravens game that comes down to the end. I'll say this too, because I live in central Pennsylvania now, Dan, like Hershey, right? So there's a lot of Steelers fans here, and I talk with them in Pittsburgh too. There is no greater disconnect in the NFL than how people feel nationally about Mike Tomlin versus how Steelers fans feel about Mike Tomlin. A lot of Steelers fans want him gone. They've wanted him gone for a while. They do not think he's nearly what the rest of us all seem to think he is. It's really fascinating because, and you can say it about a lot of fan bases, not like this. I mean, it's like polar opposites when you talk to Steelers fans about Mike Tomlin versus any other person about Mike Tomlin.
Well, I think the national conversation, and analysts are very careful what they say about Mike Tomlin nationally. You know, it's always great respect. You know, he wins. They always have winning records. They make, all of these things. But if you're a Pittsburgh fan and you have another one and done, as much as you may love his demeanor and his approach and tough guy, and he won a Super Bowl and, they don't fire. I mean, after a while, I got to start. I have to at least question that,
Well, look, the streak of winning records is impressive. And the two things that he gets a lot of credit for, and rightfully so, we love hearing him talk. We just love his quotes. We love hearing him talk. And he's won a lot of games with quarterbacks that are not elite, not even close to elite. But even think about like the playoffs, right? You go right down the line. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, even C.J. Stroud. Russell Wilson is not in that category. They have not had a guy in that category to go toe-to-toe with even a Justin Herbert. Obviously, Joe Burrow. They don't have that guy. And they haven't since Ben was healthy and in his prime.
What are the Patriots doing?
That's a little bit of a head scratcher to me on multiple levels, right? Because think about the conviction you have to have in a guy to name him the successor, put that in his contract, to put him out there for a year. And it's funny because most fan bases, Dan, when you say bad things about their team, they don't like it. But when I did the NFL Network game last week when they played the Chargers, I said the truth, which is They probably have the worst roster in the NFL. They probably have the worst O-line, probably the worst receiving core. And even if you want to nitpick, they're at least in the conversation there. So when you start with that, I'm a little surprised that Mayo would only get 1 year. I actually would probably have made a change with the guys making the personnel decisions before I would Mayo. And here's the thing that's really, they need to be very careful of, right? Drake May looks really good and made a lot of progress that year under Alex Van Pelt, their offensive coordinator, despite the fact that they might have the worst O-line and the worst receiving core.
Yeah.
So now you might be stunning his progress. You know, it'll be interesting to see who they hire, who is calling the offense, because I really think they're at a point right now where every decision you make should be what's best for Drake May, because he is the franchise. I'm not sure moving on from Van Pelt, moving on from the coaching staff is what will end up being best for Drake May, but it looks like it's what's going to happen.
Can the Lions replicate what they did defensively last night against Minnesota when they get to the postseason?
Man, I hope so. That was awesome. I am so happy for them and their fans. You know, with all these injuries, I probably said to you a couple times over the last couple of months, Dan, I thought it's just too much for them to overcome. And I think if they had lost last night, it would be, right? 3 road playoff games. I don't see that happening. But now they only need to win 2 home playoff games. That is different. Getting Anzalone back was gigantic. They have excellent safeties, Kirby Joseph and Branch, who they now moved to nickel. Aaron Glenn called an incredible game, and they have a legitimate chance now to get to the first Super Bowl in franchise history with the way they played on defense last night. No wonder Aaron Glenn is getting all these head coaching interviews. That was masterful last night.
How was it locally, the reaction with Saquon Barkley not playing in this regular season finale with a chance to become the all-time single-season rushing leader?
Well, this will probably surprise you, Dan, that this would be the case in the city of Philadelphia, but it was very polarizing, right? I mean, they talked about it on the local radio all week. And, you know, the interesting thing was the quotes from some of the guys. You know, even if you felt one way or the other, when Saquon said, you know, my dad was the most upset because it would have meant a lot for us to have our name in the record books forever. You know, when you heard him talk a little bit, but then he kind of backed off of that a little bit. The problem is, you know, and I realize the other guys would love to be a part of the record too, but you're not going to put him out there with the second string offensive line. And so then you got to have Lane Johnson at like 34, 35. You got to have those guys out there. And I think Sirianni made the right decision. The only way you really look dumb, and I love history and I love Saquon and all that stuff, but the only way you really look dumb is if you lose one of your best players in a game that has no significance whatsoever. You're locked in as the number 2 seed, and then you don't have those guys when you're playing the Packers on Sunday, who are one of the better teams in the NFL.
Good to catch up with you. Safe travels. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Ross Tucker, host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. CBS Sports Westwood 1, and he'll be there with the Steelers Ravens, and then he's got the Packers and the Eagles coming up.